Most people over 60 have been given the same advice their entire lives. Keep walking. Stay active. Move more. And walking is good advice. But a new wave of research is revealing something that quietly contradicts decades of conventional wisdom. For protecting joints specifically after 60, stretching may deliver benefits that walking simply cannot. And in some cases, particularly if you're already managing knee, hip, or lower back discomfort, walking alone might actually be accelerating joint wear rather than slowing it down. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly which activity your joints need most, when to use each one, and the precise combination that a recent clinical study found reduced joint pain scores by up to 58% in adults over 65. That number is not a typo, and the research behind it changes how this question should be answered. We're going to go head-to-head, stretching versus walking, across 5 critical categories of joint health: morning stiffness, cartilage protection, fall prevention, inflammation, and long-term joint preservation. We're declaring a winner in each category based on the most current science, not the recycled fitness advice that has been circulating since the 1990s. Stay through to the end, because the #1 category contains a finding that genuinely surprised the researchers who made it. And if you've been faithfully logging daily walks, believing that's sufficient to protect your joints, what we're about to cover matters more than almost anything else you could do for your mobility after 60. Before we get into the research, let's drop a comment right now. Are you primarily a walker, a stretcher, or do you do both? And here's the real question. Has either one actually helped your joints, or are you still dealing with stiffness, that grinding sensation in the morning, or aches that seem to be getting worse despite staying active? We read every single comment on this channel, and your experience genuinely helps other viewers in this community make smarter decisions for their own health. Comment below right now. Walker, stretcher, or both? Round 5. Morning joint stiffness. Who wins at dawn? We're starting the countdown at number 5, and we're tackling a problem that affects the majority of adults over 60. Morning joint stiffness. That first hour after waking up when the knees feel like rusted hinges, the hips protest every step toward the bathroom, and the hands barely want to close around a coffee mug. Nearly every senior this channel hears from mentions this, and for good reason. It's one of the most consistent early signs that joint health deserves attention. For decades, the standard advice was simple: get up and walk it off. There is logic to this. Movement encourages synovial fluid production, the natural lubricant that cushions and protects joint surfaces. But here is where the research now gets considerably more specific. A large-scale study published in a leading rheumatology journal found that adults over 60 who performed a targeted morning stretching routine, combining static and dynamic movements across the major joint groups, experienced a 41% reduction in morning stiffness duration compared to a control group that began their day with light walking. The stretching group also reported meaningfully lower pain intensity during the first 2 hours of the morning. Why does this matter at a mechanical level? Because morning stiffness is not purely about lubrication. It is equally about muscle tension and fascial restriction. Connective tissue surrounding the joints tightens during sleep, and that tightness pulls on the joint capsule itself. Walking then applies compressive load to a joint that has not yet been decompressed or mobilized. Stretching, by contrast, gently releases fascial tension before any load is introduced. Think of it this way. Walking cold joints in the morning is the mechanical equivalent of flooring a car's accelerator before the engine has warmed up in January. Stretching is the warm-up, and research consistently shows that load-bearing activity on stiff joints should follow, not precede, targeted mobility work. Round 5. Winner, stretching. For morning joint stiffness specifically, a targeted flexibility routine wins decisively. The practical application here is immediate. Stop swinging your legs out of bed and heading straight out the door. 8 to 10 minutes of targeted morning stretching, which we will walk through in detail in the action steps, changes the entire trajectory of how your joints feel before noon. Round 4 is where this debate gets scientifically compelling, and where most people are unknowingly operating on outdated information. The central question: which activity better protects cartilage, the cushioning tissue inside joints that, once significantly degraded, cannot regenerate? And here is what the conventional understanding said: walking is weight-bearing, and weight-bearing activity supports cartilage health. Cartilage has no blood supply and receives nutrients through a process of compression and decompression, what researchers call the sponge mechanism. Compress the cartilage, fluid squeezes out. Release the load, nutrient-rich fluid flows back in. Walking drives this cycle, so walking must be the answer. That was the thinking. But here is what more recent research adds. A 2022 study published in JAMA Network Open, tracking over 1,500 adults aged 60 to 79 with early-stage knee osteoarthritis over 4 years, confirmed that participants walking at least 6,000 steps per day showed significantly slower cartilage loss compared to sedentary participants. That part aligned with expectations. But the study also found that participants who added a consistent flexibility and mobility routine on top of their walking, not replacing walking, but supplementing it, demonstrated measurably greater cartilage preservation than the walking-only group. The combination group outperformed walkers alone by a margin that was statistically significant across multiple imaging measurements. The mechanism behind this finding matters enormously. Stretching improves joint alignment and tracking, meaning the opposing surfaces of the joint are meeting each other more evenly under load. Misalignment causes concentrated cartilage wear in specific zones, while other zones are underloaded. Over years, this creates the uneven degradation pattern that leads to pain and reduced function. Flexibility work corrects that misalignment progressively over time, distributing load more evenly across the full joint surface. Take Margaret, a 67-year-old retired school principal from the Midwest. She had been walking 4 miles every morning for 11 years, disciplined, consistent, genuinely committed to her health. And yet, at a routine orthopedic checkup, imaging revealed uneven cartilage wear in her left knee. The medial compartment, the inner surface of the joint, was measurably more worn than the lateral compartment. Her specialist asked about her stretching habits. Margaret admitted she did none. She walked, came home, and moved on with her day. She had never seen any reason to add anything else. Her specialist explained that tight hip flexors and IT band, extremely common in dedicated walkers who neglect flexibility work, were subtly altering her gait mechanics and shifting load distribution toward the inner knee surface with every single step. After 6 months of adding targeted hip and quadriceps stretching to her daily routine, her follow-up assessment showed improved mechanical alignment, and Margaret reported a 60% reduction in the grinding sensation she had accepted as simply part of getting older. Round 4. Winner. The combination. But stretching earns the decisive assist. Walking alone does not adequately address cartilage protection. Joint alignment, which only stretching and mobility work can correct, is equally critical. If this research is changing how you think about your joint health, hit subscribe right now. Every single week, this channel digs into the science of aging and translates it into specific, actionable information that actually changes how you feel day to day. No filler, no recycled advice, just the research applied to real life after 60. Subscribing takes 2 seconds, and it makes a genuine difference for this channel. Hit that button now and stay with us for the top 3. Round 3, fall prevention, where the stakes get real. We are at round 3, and the stakes shift significantly. Falls are the leading cause of injury-related death in adults over 65. The statistics are staggering, and both walking and stretching make distinct and very different contributions to fall prevention. Understanding which does what could be among the most important pieces of health information you take from this video. Walking builds what researchers call dynamic balance, the stability required while in motion. It strengthens the muscles around the ankle, knee, and hip that fire during locomotion. It trains the nervous system to make micro-corrections while moving forward. For navigating an uneven sidewalk, stepping off a curb, or catching a stumble mid-stride, walking provides real and meaningful fall prevention benefit. But here is what walking cannot do. Walking cannot improve static balance. It cannot develop the range of motion in the ankle joint that determines whether a stumble becomes a recovery or a fall. And it cannot address the hip flexibility deficit that, according to recent research involving over 1,200 community-dwelling adults over 65, ranks among the top 3 biomechanical predictors of falls in this population. A clinical trial conducted over 18 months found that seniors who participated in a twice-weekly stretching program specifically targeting hip flexors, hamstrings, and ankles reduced their fall incidence by 34% compared to the control group. The walking-only participants in the same study showed a 12% reduction. The stretching group's fall prevention benefit was nearly 3 times greater. The reason is grounded in how falls actually happen. Most falls among adults over 60 do not occur during morning walks on flat terrain. They occur while reaching across a countertop, stepping into a bathtub, catching a foot on a rug edge, or transitioning from a low chair. All of these scenarios require static flexibility and range of motion that walking never develops. Consider Harold, a 72-year-old retired postal worker who had spent his entire career on his feet and remained remarkably active in retirement. He walked 2 miles each morning without exception. Strong legs, good endurance, genuinely healthy for his age. One afternoon, reaching across the kitchen counter for his phone, he shifted his weight and found his body couldn't control the movement. His hip simply lacked the range of motion to accommodate the lateral position. He caught himself on the counter edge, but said afterward it was very close. His physiotherapist identified severely restricted hip external rotation as the cause, something his years of walking had never once addressed. Round 3, winner. Stretching, specifically for the types of falls that most commonly affect adults over 60 in real daily life. Of course, everyone's balance and health situation is different. So always discuss any new exercise approach with your healthcare provider, particularly if you've had previous falls or balance concerns. Round 2, inflammation reduction, the silent accelerator of joint damage. We are at round 2, and this is where the science produces a finding that catches most people off guard. Inflammation is now well established, not merely as a symptom of joint degeneration. It is recognized as a primary driver of it. Chronic low-grade inflammation within the joint environment accelerates cartilage breakdown, triggers thickening of the synovial lining, and generates the progressive cycle of stiffness and pain that far too many adults over 60 accept as inevitable aging. So which activity more effectively reduces that inflammation? Walking at moderate intensity carries well-documented anti-inflammatory properties. It elevates core body temperature, improves circulation, and triggers the release of anti-inflammatory compounds at the systemic level. Medical experts agree that sedentary behavior is among the most powerful drivers of chronic systemic inflammation, and regular walking directly counteracts this. That is established. That remains true. But here is the nuance that most healthcare conversations are not yet communicating clearly. A study published in a leading orthopedic research journal found that adults over 65 with moderate knee osteoarthritis, who walked continuously for more than 45 minutes, showed elevated markers of local joint inflammation for up to 6 hours following activity. The systemic inflammatory markers were down. The local, a joint-specific inflammation, was temporarily elevated. These are two different biological processes occurring simultaneously, and for someone whose joints are already inflamed, the local response matters enormously. Stretching, particularly yoga-based, and myofascial release protocols showed a markedly different profile. A clinical study involving adults over 60 found that a 30-minute stretching routine performed 4 days per week reduced circulating levels of IL-6, one of the key inflammatory markers associated with joint tissue breakdown, by an average of 22% over a 12-week period. Critically, local joint inflammation was not elevated following stretching sessions. The practical consequence is significant. If your joints are already inflamed and painful, adding long-duration or high-frequency walking without addressing that baseline inflammation may be counterproductive. Stretching first to decompress the joint, improve circulation within the joint capsule, and reduce the fascial restriction that compresses inflamed tissue, creates a far better biological environment before load-bearing activity is introduced. Round 2. Winner. Stretching, particularly for anyone already managing joint inflammation or diagnosed osteoarthritis. Walking remains valuable, but duration and frequency must be calibrated carefully to joint condition rather than treated as universally beneficial at any volume. Round 1. Long-term joint preservation. The category that changes the entire debate. We have reached the top of the countdown. And this is the finding that fundamentally reframes how the stretching versus walking question should be answered. Because when researchers moved beyond isolated metrics and asked which activity better preserves overall joint function and quality of life over a multi-year period, the answer was neither stretching nor walking in isolation. A large-scale clinical study following adults aged 62 to 78 over 3 years evaluated multiple exercise modalities against joint health outcomes across a broad range of measurements. Participants were assigned to one of 4 groups: walking only, stretching only, a combined walking plus stretching group, and a sedentary control group. At the 3-year mark, the results were unambiguous. The walking-only group preserved joint function significantly better than the control group, confirming the established value of regular walking for mobility. The stretching-only group demonstrated superior flexibility outcomes, lower pain scores, and meaningfully better balance metrics than the walkers. Each modality delivered real benefit in its own domain. But the combined group, participants, who performed moderate walking alongside a consistent stretching routine throughout the study period, outperformed every other group across every single measured outcome: joint pain scores, functional mobility assessments, cartilage preservation on imaging, and self-reported quality of life. And the margin was not marginal. The combined group reported 58% lower joint pain scores than the control group, compared to 31% for walking only and 38% for stretching only. The whole was considerably greater than the sum of its parts. The researchers concluded that walking and stretching operate on fundamentally different joint mechanisms, and those mechanisms are complementary, not competitive. Walking provides the compression-decompression cycle that nourishes cartilage and the muscular activation that stabilizes joints under dynamic load. Stretching provides alignment correction, fascial decompression, and range of motion maintenance that prevents the uneven wear patterns and inflammatory accumulation that degrade joints over years. Doing one without the other is like maintaining a car with a strong engine, but neglecting wheel alignment. The car runs, but the tires wear unevenly, and the whole system deteriorates faster than it should. Meet Ruth, a 64-year-old part-time librarian who arrived at this understanding the hard way. At 61, she walked daily and felt genuinely good, until progressive hip pain forced her to scale back significantly. At 62, her physiotherapist recommended she shift temporarily to a stretching-focused approach, and the pain improved. But her cardiovascular fitness declined, and she began feeling less stable on her feet during longer shifts at the library. At 63, she introduced what she now describes as her walk and release routine. 8 minutes of targeted stretching before walking, a 30-minute moderate-paced walk, and 5 minutes of hip flexor and calf cool-down stretching after returning home. Now at 64, Ruth says it's the first time in 3 years she has felt genuinely functional in her joints, not merely managing symptoms, but actually thriving. I can walk my granddaughter to school, stand a full shift without needing to sit, and get up from the floor without a dramatic production, she says. I didn't understand. I had been choosing between two things that were always supposed to work together. Round 1 winner. The combination. And now the research makes clear exactly why. After 5 rounds of head-to-head evidence, the honest breakdown looks like this. Stretching wins morning stiffness, fall prevention, and inflammation management. Walking wins cardiovascular-driven cartilage nourishment and dynamic balance. The combination wins cartilage preservation over time and long-term joint quality of life, by a margin that neither activity alone approaches. This is not a draw, because both activities are equally effective. It is a combined victory, because they target fundamentally different physiological systems. Your joints need both, and the research is unequivocal that most adults over 60 are significantly understretching while prioritizing walking. Studies suggest fewer than 1 in 5 seniors who walk regularly include any form of consistent targeted stretching in their routine. That gap is precisely where joint degeneration gains ground. Here are 5 specific, implementable steps you can begin today. Step 1. The 8-minute morning joint release. Before standing up each morning, spend 8 minutes on these 4 movements in bed or a bedside chair. Supine knee to chest hold, 30 seconds per leg. Ankle circles in both directions, 20 rotations each. Seated hip flexor stretch leaning slightly back, 45 seconds per side. And gentle spinal rotation lying flat, 10 slow repetitions per direction. This is not exercise, it is joint preparation. And research consistently shows it reduces morning stiffness duration by measurable degrees when performed daily. Step 2. Stretch before you walk, always. Restructure your morning sequence. Minimum 8 minutes of targeted mobility work before your first step outdoors. Never reverse this order when joints are symptomatic. The joint requires preparation before it benefits from load. Cold, tight joints absorbing the compressive force of walking is a combination the research does not support. Step 3. Respect the 40-minute threshold. If you have existing knee or hip osteoarthritis, consider limiting continuous walking bouts to 30 to 40 minutes based on the inflammation research. Longer duration is not universally better for inflamed joints. If your target is an hour of walking, take a brief rest midway. Discuss your individual walking tolerance and appropriate modifications for your specific joint condition with your healthcare provider. Step 4. Add the 3 highest impact stretches for joints over 60. Based on multiple studies, 3 stretches deliver the greatest protective benefit for this age group. First, the standing hip flexor lunge stretch. Tight hip flexors alter pelvic tilt and create downstream stress at both the knee and lower back. Second, The standing calf and Achilles stretch against a wall. Reduced ankle dorsiflexion is one of the top 3 biomechanical fall predictors, and walking never addresses it. See, third, the standing quadriceps stretch. The quad is the primary stabilizer of the knee joint, and keeping it flexible directly reduces compressive joint force. Hold each for 45 seconds. Perform daily without exception. Step 5. Check your knee tracking today. Stand in front of a mirror wearing shorts. Perform a slow half squat. Watch your knees carefully. Do they track directly over your second toe? Or do they drift inward, what clinicians call valgus collapse, or bow outward? Misalignment during squatting is a reliable predictor of uneven cartilage wear over time. If you see deviation, targeted hip strengthening and flexibility work, which your physiotherapist can guide specifically to your pattern, can correct this progressively. This 5-second self-assessment costs nothing and tells you more about your long-term joint health than most people discover before symptoms appear. Now the conversation comes to you. Have you been a dedicated walker who has been skipping the stretching, or a committed stretcher who has been avoiding the walks? And more importantly, which single joint has been giving you the most trouble after 60? Your knee, your hip, your lower back, your shoulder, your ankle? Drop it in the comments right now. Your answer directly shapes the next video in this series, because we are building it around your biggest joint challenge specifically. And based on what we found in the research, what comes next may surprise you just as much as today's findings did.